being able to, and honestly, I think I tell my kids all the time, I think this is one of the most important skills to have as just a human being. If you can figure out what to do when things don't go the way you expect them to go, with whatever the plan is, if you can think on your feet and come up with a solution without, kind of falling to the ground, I think that's one of the things that just, separates people from who can get things done and people who can't, right? Like, everybody has a plan, but what do you do when the plan doesn't happen the way you expect it to? And
that's right.
In journalism, that's every day.
And how do you pivot?
That's every single day as a
Welcome to the Whole Student Podcast with Cal Balavan. Whole student refers to the magical moment when a student is fully seen, heard, and known. This is the spark of a relationship between student and teacher, where the former is catalyzed on a journey beyond what they thought possible, and the latter is a proud advisor cheering from the sidelines. The Whole Student Podcast asks guests to reflect back to their moment, the person who became a transformative teacher in their lives and on the journey they were set upon. Our guest today is Mike Osegueda. Mike Osegueda is affectionately known in industries as Mike Oz, a former journalist responsible for the beloved web series 25-Year-Old Baseball Cards on Yahoo Sports. He's covered everything you love about Major League Baseball, including multiple World Series. He broke new ground in entertainment coverage at the Fresno Bee with his pioneering work on his local cultural blog, the Fresno Beehive. His radio show, the podcast Osmosis, introduces audiences to up-and-coming and local musicians ready to break out. But his biggest personal success is definitely his pivot into entrepreneurship. Mike is the co-founder of the nationally renowned Taco Truck Throwdown, and his community building work, bringing that event to life, helped him start his own company, Fresno Street Eats, which produces more than a dozen weekly food events in the central San Joaquin Valley, plus festivals and themed events like Fres Yes Fest, Tacos, Brews, and Jams, and the Brewery District Block Party. Go look at the Fresno Street Eats IG account. You will be instantly hungry. It is my pleasure to welcome Mike Oz to the Whole Student Podcast. Mike, welcome.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. That was all very, very. It's always weird to hear all the stuff together into one little paragraph, and it's cool though, man. It kind of helps you reflect on, everything.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there. And which brings me back to, the first question I always ask guests is talk about the student they were. And oftentimes when they have a singular interest, they can talk about that student. I was a science student and I became a scientist, but you have so many different interests and different ways in which you've impacted the world. I'm really curious to find out what kind of student you were.
I was a journalism student, man. Like I was straight up a journalism student, right? Like,
wow.
And anybody who's ever, I think, a journalist probably understands the sort of transformative place is always the school paper, right? And it's
wow.
More than any class, where you can learn out of a book. It's always like the working on the high school paper, working on the college paper. Like those are the things that kind of get you going. So, by the time I knew I wanted to be a journalist when I was in 5th grade. So
wow.
Like I was very much like read the sports page, study the box scores. Like this is the kind of stuff that I want to do. And then, as I got a little older, I was reading Sports Illustrated, and that was it. At that age, I'm talking like late 90s. Sports Illustrated was like the dream job, right? If you can go work for SI, and obviously everything in the media has changed in the last 20 years, but that was kind of how I grew up. Like, yeah, man, I want to write for Sports Illustrated. So even when I was in school, like I guess the kind of student I was always like, I would do what I needed to do in my classes, but like my focus was always, hey, we got to get a newspaper out, or we got to do, we got to do this. Or
Right.
So that was always kind of my focus. And I went to school at San Jose State University where we had a daily newspaper. So, it was basically like a job, and you did your classes in the morning, and you put out the paper, and we would do the paper from 2 until midnight every day. And
wow.
Get the paper out, and then boom, go to sleep, and then wake up and go to your classes in the morning, and then go to the paper. And there's plenty of opportunities, or plenty of times I remember like, we're gonna be up late tonight. I'm not gonna make that 9 a.m. class tomorrow, but that's just geography. Like I'm journalism all the way. And as I look back at my life now, like I probably should have taken some more business classes or something, but
fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, along that way in your journey, you're the journalist student. There had to be a teacher or two where you felt seen, heard, and known. Set the stage for us. Who was that person? What was that class? What was that moment?
Yeah, I mean, so my this is an easy one for me. I mean, there's one guy, and anybody who's sort of probably in a 20-year span at San Jose State would say the same thing. His name is Mac Lundstrom. He was the advisor of the newspaper. He was the kind of the first line of first guy you meet probably when you go into journalism classes. The sort of beginning news writing guy.
Yeah.
So he was kind of the heart and soul of that place. In terms of journalism and so he was definitely the guy. And for me, like again, I kind of came in knowing what I wanted to do, and I had already kind of gone down that path. I was I graduated from high school, and I'd already been writing for like the local. I'm from Fremont, California. I'd already been writing for the local paper. I already had bylines. Already did all that stuff. I did like a summer program with the San Jose Mercury News, which is one of the big papers in there. And I thought, like, here I am, like thinking I'm the man. I went to campus my first day of college before school started. Walked into the newspaper, like, hey, I'm here. Like, what's up?
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, get out of here. Like, we have
That's right.
And sent me off. It's like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. And I immediately felt kind of like, oh, the thing I wanted to do, now I'm being told like I got to go do all this other stuff. And and honestly, like in the beginning, like I understood the prerequisites and all that kind of stuff, but the sort of school end of it, like the sort of like let's read books and talk about theory and all that in journalism, like didn't really get going the way doing the job does, right?
Right.
So in those classes, it was cool, and like I could, I think, so Mac was my teacher in a couple of those classes. I think he knew, like he could tell that I was into this and I was ready, and
right.
But I remember like one of the class, like the second year class, I was just kind of like, pouring out on this. Like, is this really what I want to do? I felt like I wanted to do this, but that's really it, like, and I think he noticed it in me, and I think he was like, hey, I'm going to go introduce you to some people from the paper. I'm going to let you meet them. And I think he knew that they would probably give me a chance. And I think I probably had like a C or D in that class, which, I mean, I could have easily been doing better. And he I think that, hey, I needed something else. And so he took me in.
Wow.
They're like, hey, yeah, you want to go cover a baseball game? And I'm like, yes, I want to go cover a baseball. That's exactly what I want to do. And so that kind of kicked me back into it. And
nice.
Energized me. But I think, the thing that I always realized about him was like, he one had a passion for the journalism business that is unmatched in anybody that I'd ever come across. And two, I think he did a really good job of teaching you like how to conduct yourself as a professional journalist as you're in college, and how to, what the standard is, and this isn't just we're not just here doing sort of an after school activity. We're putting out a real paper, journalists, like, setting that belief early on. And, as then we got into newspaper, I mean, I probably did every job you could do there. I was there for like 6 semesters, editor-in-chief, I just stuck around the newspaper and wanted to do as much as I could. So, he became the sort of daily guy. And, I still remember a lot of the little stuff he would teach us. So he is the, the number one teacher, the inspiration, the whatever you want to call it. Like that's that's my guy, and a bunch of my friends, he's their guy, and he's it.
So you and Max stay in touch? What's your relationship like now?
A little bit, like I think it's here and there. The interesting thing is, he was, like I said, very old school newspaper guy. Worked at the Mercury News for forever. And I remember I ended up in Fresno because I graduated, went to the Fresno B. I came here, I was 22 years old, right? Working at Fresno B, fresh out of school. And so I talked to him, and I lasted the Fresno B about almost 10 years or so. And then I went to Yahoo Sports, which is where I started covering baseball. And at the time, when I left the newspaper, like he told me like he was disappointed that I was going to the website, right? That I was going to go, and so that was tough, man, because I was like, this whole thing the whole journalism thing is really built on mentors, right? Like there's a bunch of different people who have helped me over the years and done that, and hopefully I've done that for some other people over the years.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's like this obligation sometimes to them, like, hey, I gotta, you invested in me when I was 19 years old, 20 years old, and I have to live up to the what you invested. And so like, honestly, man, like it was one of those things where to me it was like I wanted to be a baseball writer since I was a kid, and it was like, you're gonna go cover the World Series, you're gonna go do all this stuff, and I was proud and psyched and everything. But then part of me felt bad because I knew that I had let down. He was a mentor, right? And so and it wasn't like a like a big deal necessarily, but I know that part of that was part of what was going on there, and
and expectations changed too, because technology changed and journalism changed.
I mean, the whole industry changed. So
big time.
I was definitely not alone, and
fair enough.
And I look back at it now. I mean, probably now it's not even a big deal. He probably doesn't even remember that, but like,
wow.
I think about it now, and like all the people that I went to school with. I mean, there's very many of them who are practicing journalists. I almost said I'm one of the only ones, forgetting that I'm not actually a journalist anymore.
Right. Fair enough. Interesting.
But for a while, I was one of the only ones.
Well, let's talk about that, because you did a shift. And this entire season is special. We're focusing on entrepreneurs. So I want to ask you specifically, who was it in your life that put you on a path to becoming the entrepreneur?
I didn't realize it at the time, but it was definitely my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
So, my grandpa has actually, it's a very interesting, there's some interesting parallels that I never really caught on until like recently. So my grandpa, I grew up, and he had like a family business. He had a motor shop. So it was called Electric Motor Service, and they would fix like small electric motors. So not like car motors, but like the motors that go into like conveyor belts or stuff like that. But then also probably the more practical thing would be like if you're on, say you're at Disneyland and you're on like Splash Mountain, the motors that kind of run all the little animals and stuff. So there's small electric motors that, a lot of the clients in the Bay Area were like, and people that as I grew up, I was like, oh, you're a big tech company, but they were using them for, conveyor belts and stuff like that.
Got it.
So the motor shop was essentially, I don't know, 8 members of my family. So it was my mom, my grandma worked there, my aunt worked there, my aunt and uncle. I started working there when I was like 10 years old. My first job was literally sweeping the shop and shredded paper and, doing that kind of stuff. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I would just spend my summers working there. And it was wild, man, to look back at it. They gave me all kinds of responsibilities that I at the time, like I just dove into it, but I didn't know what I was doing. They would be like, hey, can you reconcile all these invoices so we can get our accounts receivable up to date? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try. And I grew up around that. And, I never, at the time, like that's not what I wanted to do. That was just like, oh, I'm just going to hang out with my family and I'm going to make a little bit of money to buy a Nintendo game or something. And as I got older, I started thinking back at that. And my grandpa died. It's been 2 years now. And one of the things that, when I wrote an obituary and did all that kind of stuff. And I have some recordings I did of him, like talking through his life. And I remember asking him at one point, like, when did you know that you wanted to be go off on your own? Like, how did you know it was time to go off on your own and not just be, working for somebody else?
Yeah.
And because I was thinking about that. I mean, I've been thinking about that for years now, because I've always kind of had some side hustle stuff. And one of the things I never really realized when I was younger was that, he at the time, like I knew it from my perspective as a kid, this has always been what my grandpa did. Right. But like, actually it wasn't, right. He had worked for all these other companies and done all these other things.
Right.
And it wasn't until he was like 50 that he went out on his own.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so it as I got into that thing of reinventing myself, like, I had to think back about that and be like, here's this guy that I totally looked up to.
Right.
And he didn't do that until he was like later in his life too. Like if he could do that, I could do that, right? Like
That's right. That's right.
And he kind of ended up in kind of a similar situation. He didn't necessarily make the choice. He kind of got pushed, right? Like I got pushed. Like I didn't decide to leave Yahoo Sports. Yahoo Sports decided I was leaving, and
Fair enough.
And that's kind of what happened with my grandpa. Okay. It was a little bit different, but it got me into understanding the idea that like you can reinvent yourself and you can take the skills you've learned in one industry and you can apply them to another industry. And I think this is not a journalism podcast, but I would always advocate to journalists that if you can be a good journalist, you could do so many more other things, right? Because being able to write and communicate, I feel like puts you ahead in so many other business sectors, right? Just being able to write a good pitch or write a email, speak confidently, is gonna open doors for you. The way we build sources as journalists and get information is not all that different than building a relationship with a client who don't want to like pay you to do some work or something. Being able to, and honestly, I think I tell my kids all the time, I think this is one of the most important skills to have as just a human being. If you can figure out what to do when things don't go the way you expect them to go, with whatever the plan is, if you can think on your feet and come up with a solution without, kind of falling to the ground. I think that's one of the things that just, separates people from who can get things done and people who can't, right? Like, everybody has a plan, but what do you do when the plan doesn't happen the way you expect it to? And
that's right.
In journalism, that's every day.
And how do you pivot?
Every single day as a journalist, right? So, there's plenty of days where I'm like, oh, I have this story I have to do. My deadline's 5:00. I need to talk to these 3 people. The number of times that actually happens as a journalist, like, is very slim, right? You always have to be like, okay, crap, this person's on vacation. This person's not calling me back. Like, how do I do this thing?
Right.
You always have to come up with a solution. So, those types of things I think help you in so many other industries that,
that's right.
As I started to reflect on like who I was and what I had, I was like, I could do all this other stuff because journalism taught me how to do it. I just need to be brave enough to kind of like apply those things to a different industry.
Yeah. And now it's interesting as I hear you talk about Mac and your grandfather, and I see the inspiration they had on you in different ways. I see the impact you've had as a storyteller, as a journalist and beyond. And now in many ways, you're inspiring others too. And I didn't know if I was going to go into this direction in relationship to the interview, but you've made a phenomenal impact, catalyzed by a tragedy in your life. And I don't think a lot of people outside of the Fresno sector know about that. Could you share that story?
Yeah. So I guess to set the big sort of timeline of this is I got laid off at Yahoo Sports February 2021. And so, I am in kind of like, where do I go now kind of mode, right? Yeah. And 23 days later, it was actually my son's birthday, and my sister, my youngest, I have 3 sisters from my dad's side. The youngest of my 3 sisters there, Courtney, she was killed in a hit and run accident. She was walking out of her job. She worked at like a skilled nursing facility, and somebody went into the wrong lane and just hit her as she was kind of getting to her car and just left. So it was, kind of weird. She was in the Bay Area, so we were, kind of getting news here and there, and thinking, okay, she was in an accident. Well, okay, she'll be okay, right? She broke an arm, broke a leg or something, and then it was like, oh, well, they're still checking it out, and okay, well, we're going to go to the hospital. We're going to, drive from Fresno there, and all right. And, within, before, basically in the time it took to pack and get everything ready and about to hit the road is when we found out she died. And, so yeah, I mean, it was tough, man. It was, totality for me, like all in like a couple of weeks it was like, I'm like, I don't know that I'm ever going to have a month gonna, rock my world in that kind of way.
No.
And, there's a lot of stuff there that you don't anticipate, don't plan for. Like, what do you do when that happens? Right. Like, how do you,
right.
Because it's not just like, we've had people around me die. But it's
right.
Well, what happens when it's like a criminal investigation, right? And you have to deal with the police, and you have to, like, everybody, and this is my nature. I mean, this is who I am. Everybody turns to me for, okay, well, you can talk to the police, right? You can kind of do this. You can give us the information. And, before I knew it, I was basically playing reporter for my whole family, which is another layer that's hard to kind of deal with.
Yeah.
So we dealt with that. She left behind at the time, 7-year-old daughter.
Wow.
So my immediate thought is, okay, how do we take care of my niece? Credit to a lot of people out there. A lot of folks, particularly in the baseball community, got behind an effort we did to, create a college fund for Kaylee, which, I mean, far and beyond what anybody expected. We had there's a state assemblyman out here in Fresno who has been trying to get stricter laws or stricter punishments for hit and run accidents. Essentially, if you hit and kill someone and leave the scene, the punishment is like maximum 4 years. And so he was kind of trying to do some stuff there. So they brought myself and my family in to kind of help with that. So I've gone and spoke to the state assembly on behalf of that cause. And so there's just a lot of stuff there that we're still kind of dealing with. I mean, her killer is still out there in terms of, like, she's been arrested, but she's still kind of awaiting trial and that part of it. So we're still kind of reminded every couple months, we're going through there's a pretrial hearing today, and we're going to go through the whole thing. So we're still dealing with that part of it. But yeah, I mean, it was quite a, as I've told my wife and told everybody else, like, if I can make it through this month, I can make it through anything.
Yeah. And you turn what was a devastating tragedy for you and your family as an opportunity to educate folks, bring attention to something that people don't think about until it happens to them. And where did you find the strength, Mike?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think part of it is just like the idea that you just got to get up and keep going, right? Like, I've never been one to just, in general, like, settle for whatever. Like, and I remember, my first time I went to cover the World Series, it was like, I was like, cool, what do you guys want me to do? And it was, they gave me some stuff. And I think in 7 days, I ended up writing something like 50 different stories, right? Just because I'm like, give me everything, I'll do as much as I can. And so it's just that same kind of, I don't know, I just got to drive, I guess. Like, I just have sort of like a internal, like, and it's not necessarily, maybe some of it is an obligation, but I also feel like I always want to kind of do more, help and do other things. And I mean, there were definitely days where I was like, I don't want to, I need a break today. But, being there for my family, my sisters, all that kind of stuff. Like, I knew a lot of it was falling on me because it was what I was good at. And I knew that I could kind of manage those things better than some other people. So it was what I needed to do. And if it's what I got to do, I'll get it done.
Wow. Mike, that was powerful. And a story like that hasn't been shared on this podcast before. And I know what you said here in layers, from Mac to your grandfather to the passing of your sister, will inspire folks to reflect, to share, and hopefully notice the people in their lives. There's a last question I ask guests, and I'd like to ask that question, which is, if I gave you a magic wand and you could wave it, and 5 of your life's teachers could show up for a meal from your past, who would they be and why?
Are we talking, as I explained, kind of the larger web of, journalistic boards, so I can kind of go in that?
You can go anywhere.
Okay.
That's just your answer, not mine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about I think the 2 of the most important people would be, my grandfather. His name's Lee Colleen, say his name, and then Mac Lundstrom from San Jose State was definitely somebody who was those guys. I've already spoke about them, but they're on my list. Yeah. One of my great mentors, and I think I need to give her a shout out because she's fantastic, is a woman named Lori Aratani, who she was one of those people I talked about who, for some reason cared about a 17-year-old kid who, wanted to do journalism. She was a reporter at the San Jose Mercury News at the time. Right now she works for the Washington Post. And she's just one of those people that throughout the, totality of my life as it has been, since I was 17 years old, she's always kind of been somebody who was there for me, whether I was when I was in college trying to run things, or as I became a professional journalist, or as I was trying to get jobs and those kind of things. So she's somebody who has been, very, very important in my path in a lot of ways. Then another person who, again, this is the sort of journalism tree, but the guy who gave me the shot when I said, hey, I want to go, you want to go cover a baseball game. He remains one of my best friends to this day, but his name is John Perez.
Wow.
And was my, like my first editor at the paper, and the godfather to one of my children. And, so he has always, but that's part of how journalism is, though. Like, you gotta, those people that you have there that are like, hey, he looked out for me, so I need to look out for that next guy. Right. Like, and that's kind of how that goes. And then, okay, so last one, right? There's a lot of people who have looked out for me, and I think who have helped me in a lot of ways. I'm trying to think, like, I want to try to pick somebody who has helped me in more of like an entrepreneurship kind of way, but
absolutely.
I don't know, man. I might have to go back to one of my journalism people, because there's so many journalism people. But one of my first. The first executive editor who I worked with, Fresno B, and part of this is because he's no longer with us too. His name was Charlie Waters, and he was another one of those just like hard-nosed, old school journalism kind of people. Right. But he, I think did a really good job of, 1, identifying talent, 2, sort of inspiring talent, and I don't know, like I would be interested, and I think of as I am in my life right now, I would be very interested to have a conversation with him now that I'm an adult, and like, because he hired me when I was 22 years old, and I was an intern with him when I was 20, and so I'd be very curious to, like, now at 42, look back and have a conversation with him about everything that's happened in the last 20 years. So there are other people who have been sort of, in that, in that thing, but the fact that he's no longer with us, I think makes me, see how valuable that conversation could be.
That's a powerful group. And a phenomenal journey. And what I didn't share with you is how much your journey like touches me in a specific way. I grew up in Union City, California. Okay. And around the same, James Logan High School. So around the same time, and we used to read San Jose Mercury News. So there's a lot of parallels, and as you're talking, imagery is flooding back to me in a lot of ways. And so
all those good Logan sports teams at everything.
Yeah, hey, don't hate.
No. So us in Fremont. Like we always like, oh man, if we're gonna play Logan, Logan's gonna destroy us and everything, because Logan was the school for high school athletics.
Yeah, well, part of it was we only had the one high school in Union City, so everybody went there. So all the talent had to rise to the top. So, but it's Tri-City area, so it's fam. So I wanted to say that and share that because as I appreciate you for your spirit and your story, I'm saying to you that normally I say, hey, thank you for moving the learners to reflect back to the teachers and they've had in their lives, but you've also moved me to think back to the journey that somewhat parallels your journey, leaving the Bay Area, moving into California, and then being a part of the inspiration for others in a different way. So,
well, I think I'm sure you would agree. I think the one thing that I think you've heard me say a lot, and I think I'm sure education is the same way. It's like, when people invest in you, I always feel like it's important to invest in someone else.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, now it's different that I'm older and I have children to invest in too, but
that's right.
I always tried to make a point to help those next kids that want to be journalists, or, I mean, I'm sure it's also that same way with teachers, right? You want to help the young teacher, you want to help, so that's good to hear, but I think that's one message I would like to leave with everybody is just, appreciate the mentors in your life and pass that on. Right.
Perfect. Mike, much love. And as we say on the Whole Student Podcast, class dismissed. Thank you. The Whole Student Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Duncast and produced by JD Scroggin, the Director of Marketing and Communication at the Dunn School, and co-produced by Brandon Scott of Comfort Food. You can subscribe to the Whole Student Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe today. Class dismissed.